and welcome again to the latest episode of Late Night Parents. This is Ted Hicks. You can find me on Twitter, Real Ted Hicks. Big shout out to our teammates, Richie V and Dr. Michele. We're going to be in the studio once again shortly. Really looking forward to that coming up. But for now, I want to give a big shout out for Martin Luther King Day, and basically let you know, well, before I even get into that, ways to follow the show, latenightparents.com. You can find our Twitter, Facebook, and latest blog posts are available on the website. Wanted to get into 3 ways MLK speaks to our time. Every hero becomes a bore at last. That's a famous line from the 19th century philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson, but it could also apply to modern American hero, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. As the nation celebrates King's national holiday on Monday, it's easy to freeze-frame him as the benevolent dreamer carved in stone on the Washington Mall. Yet the platitudes that frame many King holiday events often fail to mention the most radical aspects of his legacy. We turn him into a Thanksgiving parade, a float. He's jolly, larger than life, and he makes us feel good. Many people vaguely know that Dr. King opposed the Vietnam War and talked more about poverty in his later years. But King also had a lot to say about issues not normally associated with civil rights that still resonate today, historians and activists say. If you're concerned about health care and climate change, or even the nastiness of our political disagreements, then King had plenty to say to you about this. To see that version of Dr. King, though, we have to dust off the cliches and look at him anew. If you're more familiar with your smartphone than your history, then try this. Think of King not just as a civil rights hero, but also as an app. His legacy has to be updated and remain relevant. So here are 3 ways we can update our MLK app to see how he spoke not only to his time, but to our time as well. Number 1, Dr. King was an environmental hero. When former Attorney General Eric Holder spoke at the King event in 2011, he described King in an unusual way. He said, Dr. King, he said, helped plant the seeds for what would become our nation's now thriving environmental justice movement. People don't think of Dr. King in that way. And, he didn't live long enough to see the environmental movement take off. He died just a few months before the Apollo 8 astronauts took the iconic Earthrise photo over the moon, which is often credited with sparking widespread environmental awareness. But he still inspires environmental activists because they say he was so eloquent in articulating a core belief of their movement, the interconnected nature of life. One of the most difficult challenges in climate change activists face today is convincing political and the business leaders to act on behalf of future generations and people in other parts of the world. A great example of how to address this challenge, some say, Dr. King talked about the interconnectedness of life. In his Christmas sermon on peace, just 5 months before his assassination, Dr. King delivered one of the most famous quotes: "All life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. we are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. Some even describe Dr. King as an ecological hero. That's the essence of ecology, is Dr. King as that type of thinker. Other environmental activists have noticed Dr. King as well. As you know, Dr. King wrote more about nature and the fragile part of life on the earth than people realize. And Dr. King even warned us that cities are gasping in polluted air and enduring contaminated water. Dr. King felt like it would be foolhardy to work for integrated schools or integrated lunch counters and not be concerned about the survival of the world in which we are to be integrated in. So when he was pouring through his sermons and his books, he discovered constant references to science and to nature. He came across note cards that were written that were, talking about the galaxy of wonder and the stars that guide sailors in storms. There's a connection between what Dr. King was saying in the 1950s and 60s and this explosion of ecology and that emerged in 1970, where everyone was saying it was all about interconnectedness. Dr. King inspired a generation of activists in the 70s and 80s who fought to remove landfills that had been replaced near communities of color. If you go back to the beginning of the environmental justice movement, a lot of those folks were active civil rights activists at the time. Even Congressman John Lewis said that environmental justice is one of the modern civil rights issues of our time. The second reason was Dr. King was a socialist before it was cool. So there was a time in American politics when calling someone a socialist was a slur. Not anymore, at least for many younger Americans who are developing a distrust of capitalism. One of the most popular politicians in recent times is Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, a self-described Democratic socialist who almost captured the Democratic nomination for president. The reasons why some millennials prefer socialism have been documented. Lingering scars from the Great Recession, staggering student debt, the great economic inequality since before the Great Depression have all contributed to an unease about capitalism. Dr. King has similar misgivings. Many historians describe him as a democratic socialist, someone who, according to the Democratic Socialists of America, believed that the economy should be shaped to meet the public needs and not to make the profits for a few. Dr. King called for universal health care and education and guaranteed annual income to the nationalization of some industries. He was a big supporter of unions, and while there was no fight for 15 campaign to raise the minimum wage during his time, he once said, even menial workers should make enough so that they can live and educate their children and buy a home and have the basic necessities of life. When Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, he was about to lead a multiracial army of poor people into Washington to force the nation's political leaders to address poverty. He saw that changing the laws was important, but that it was not itself sufficient. How radical was Dr. King's vision? Well, he spelled it out on many occasions. In 1968, he told a church audience, it didn't cost the nation of a penny to open lunch counters. It didn't cost the nation of a penny to give us the right to vote. but it will cost the nation billions to feed and house all of its citizens. The country needs a radical redistribution of wealth. In a 1966 speech to his staff, he said there must be a better distribution of wealth. And maybe America must move towards democratic socialism. In 1964, after traveling to Norway to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, King said, in both Norway and Sweden, whose economies are literally dwarfed by the size of the affluence and extent of their technology, they have no unemployment and no slums. There, men, women, and children have long enjoyed free medical care and quality education. This contrasts to the limited, halting steps taken by our rich nation deeply troubled him. Even one of Dr. King's most utopian visions, a guaranteed income, is getting serious discussion today because the fears that automation will erase many jobs. There's even a new proposal to give every newborn in the U.S. baby bonds, accounts between $500,000 and $50,000 that parents couldn't touch until their children turned 18, as a way to combat inequality. There are those who say Dr. King gravitated toward socialism later in life, but like many Americans today, he saw its possibilities first as a young man. In a letter to his future wife, Coretta Scott, a 20-something, King wrote, "I imagine you already know that I am much more socialist in my economy theory than capitalistic. So today, capitalism has outlived its usefulness. It has brought about a system that takes the necessities from the masses to give luxury to the classes." The third reason was Dr. King never let a political disagreement turn nasty. There were so many different leaders, but we're going to talk about Reverend Dr. Chicken Wing, a religious Uncle Tom, a traitor, and a chump. That's how one prominent leader described Dr. King when he was alive. That leader was Malcolm X. While his denunciations of King and other leaders is well known, here's a remarkable fact. There is virtually no record of King making a personal or petty attack against Malcolm X or any other black leaders who criticized him. This could be an important lesson at a time of bitter political divisions, which are often made worse by social media. Two contemporary leaders in the civil rights movement recently got together in a Twitter feud that turned personal. The clash between Harvard professor Cornel West and award-winning Ta-Nehisi Coates revolved around political philosophy. But it became so heated that Coates ended up deleting his Twitter account. Dr. King received a cascade of petty insults from Malcolm X and other black leaders during his time. But King's faith tempered his response. He was a Christian minister, and he talked about trying to love others. And if you have the empathy for your enemies, you can also do that with your rivals in civil rights. There was also a pragmatic side of Dr. King to show his reluctance to get pulled back into public feuds. It preserved alliances and kept doors open for new allies, including Malcolm X. After Malcolm broke from the Nation of Islam in 1964, he started reaching out to Dr. King and other civil rights leaders. He traveled to Selma, Alabama in 1965, where Dr. King was leading the march to Montgomery to offer support. A friend of Malcolm once said, the former Nation of Islam leader believed Dr. King would be the most responsive of all civil rights leaders to his effort to reconcile. There was a mutual respect between those two. When Dr. King learned that Malcolm X had come to Selma to support him, he was quoted as saying, "Hey, that Malcolm is a beautiful brother." He always had a deep affection for Malcolm. Malcolm X obviously challenged and did, say many unkind words about Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence, but their disagreements never turned personal or nasty. It just didn't help to deal with other black leaders' insults. It always helped Dr. King to deal with something, some type of the people today that may, really find hard to believe. He was persistently unpopular during his lifetime. But one of the things that people erase from history is how unpopular and scared of Dr. King was by most Americans at the time. I'm not just talking about in 67, 68. I'm talking well, into the early 60s. Polls showed that most Americans did not approve of the March on Washington in 1963 and the following year, and as well before the 1965 Voting Rights Acts were passed. There was a New York Times poll that showed that most Americans thought the civil rights movement had gone too far. The U.S. government thought Dr. King was so dangerous that they treated him like an enemy of the state. We now see his March on Washington speech as the greatest American speech of the 20th century. But, at the time they were uncomfortable with grappling with the fact that this is the moment that the FBI decided to have wall-to-wall surveillance of Dr. King. Today we have wall-to-wall celebrations about Dr. King. He's now on par with American titans like Presidents George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Americans write tributes, sing songs about how much Dr. King changed America. But here's one more uncomfortable thought that explains why Dr. King remains so relevant. The country is still divided by the many same issues that consumed him. On the last night of his life, Dr. King told a shouting congregation of black churchgoers that we as a people would get to the promised land. That kind of optimism, though, sounds like it belongs to another era. What we now know is a leader, what we now have is a leader in the White House who denies widespread reports that he complained about Latinos and African immigrants coming to America from shithole countries. He's also a white supremacist who murders worshipers in churches, a social media landscape that pulsates with anger and accusations. Dr. King promised land doesn't sound boring when compared to today's headlines. And maybe that's what's so sad about reliving his life every January for some people. 50 years after he died, Dr. King's vision for America still sounds so far away. First thing, before we even get into it, want to give a big shout out to the Viva Los Raiders Fantasy Football League. I happen to win this year. Unbelievable. And with the winnings tomorrow, and it's a work-related fantasy football, league. So tomorrow, since I'm not claiming this on my taxes, I am privately funded pizza party for the staff at work.
Well, Ted, just make sure you send a box down to the Centric office down in Popka. My lunchtime is about 2 o'clock Eastern, so I can give you the address off the air if you're looking for the address.
You got it. And I think the second thing I was going to talk about was, and like I said, big shout out to the fantasy football and everyone that plays fantasy football.
Yes.
I think it's great for camaraderie. It's great for the just overall competition, understanding the game, and it kind of transcends you just sitting there rooting for your one local team that you've loved all your life. I mean, yes, you can continue to do that, but along with that, you can root for the individual players.
Of course.
What were you about to say?
No, I'm saying, I just like you, I play in multiple fantasy football leagues. Shout out to the co-work and co-New Orleans league I play in with all my coworkers. Ted, like yourself, I did win first place. Unlike you, I did not fund the office food party. What I did was I funded my daughter's Disney annual pass. So big shout out to those guys. Big shout out to those guys. I appreciate, the winnings, and my daughter will enjoy Disney next weekend,
Perfect. So let's get started. There's so many different things we can talk about. Before we get started, and this is primarily going to be football related, whether it's NFL, whether it's NCAA, divisional playoffs, but we have to talk about someone who's trailblazing, someone who's kind of rewriting that script a little bit. And that person is none other than, I guess, America's favorite dad, sports dad, LeVar Ball.
Yes.
It seems like he's kind of like, I don't even know if I feel okay saying this. He's kind of like our president. He's kind of rewritten the script on how things should be done. But I found myself, Danny, I'm not sure about you, the other day, I got a notification on my phone that the first game in Lithuania was taking place with both of LeVar Ball's sons playing, and I immediately went to Facebook to stream, to view the live stream.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on that?
You understand. So they go to a Division II team of Lithuania that's barely putting people in the seats. They basically sold out the game. LeVar has the ability to get this team out of one of the two leagues they're playing in to enroll them in the Big Baller Brand Challenge. Big shout-outs to LeVar Ball, because there's nothing but BBB everywhere on the court. Turn a team that nobody's ever heard of and play against a team that is led by a former Gonzaga player, Kevin Panetos, who's a guard, and it's been watched by 1.5 million people on Facebook. A Division II Lithuania game is watched by more people than an ESPN2 college basketball game on a Tuesday night.
Right. But this was happening live at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Eastern time. It was
so, and most of America's at work.
Most of America's at work. They're using their corporate internet connection, and they are just sitting there streaming, watching LeVar Ball and his brand continue to blow up. Now, I know there's been some stuff that's come out about the Better Business Bureau, and yeah, we're going to say haters going to hate. I'm just saying this guy is rewriting the script, and it's scary.
You got to think about it. The Better Business Bureau, the other BBB is after, BBB. So, yeah, that's the only thing going against LeVar Ball. If you think about what he's doing in Lithuania, it's a 5-game, it's like a 5-game tournament or showcase. If that draws, let's just say, Ted, 800,000 people every time to Facebook, he is already talking about starting a league over here in the United States as a quote-unquote alternative version for these kids going to college. If he's successful over there with this Lithuania, it would not shock me if LeVar becomes successful with this league in the United States next year.
I will say this much. Not only that, but the fact you can sit there and rip the overpriced sneakers, but he's not partnering with Nike, Adidas, or Under Armour. He's basically competing against them. If you think about it, that's his competition.
It's unheard of.
from an upstart. So there's a lot to be said about him. And yeah, he's boisterous. Yes, he's all of the above. But the story is still being written on LeVar Ball, and truthfully, I really want everything to work out.
Yeah, I mean, you want the kids to be successful. That's the most important thing. It's not about LeVar Ball. It's about LiAngelo and LaMelo. LiAngelo had the situation at UCLA, and LaMelo was only 16 years old, pulled out of high school, and now is in the middle of this. So I hope for the kids' sake, that those kids come out to be successful. I mean, whether it be all-stars or first-team All-NBA guys, that's not really the most important thing. As long as these kids can learn the things they need to and also be good basketball players at the same time and successful, that's all that matters at this point.
It's that and the fact that, like, my daughter, she's 16, and I'm sitting here saying, when he pulled his son out, said, no, he's going to be homeschooled, and he's going to be this, and this is what we're going to do, and not questioning his parenting, not questioning any of that. You're going to parent your child however you see fit. I'm just saying this stuff is unconventional.
Yeah.
It's unconventional.
Agreed.
And there's no script. So it's like any and everything that's happening, at first you kind of cringe a little bit. But it seems like, this stuff is working out. And I'm wondering if this is going to be the new blueprint for how people will do it. How these players will say, you know what, do I butt college? Do I go overseas? I mean, some of this stuff was happening already, but I'm thinking what he's doing with what's happening now, and if he can kickstart that league, you got something else on your hands.
Yep, and the NCAA will have a problem.
Oh, totally. Hey, so as we segue to the next topic that near and dear, I'm just going to throw this question out to you. Where's the love for UCF football? They're undefeated, right? You guys had a parade down there in Central Florida, right?
I mean, we had a victory parade at Disney on Sunday. The governor of Florida, Rick Scott, declared UCF the national champions. They had the block party on Monday night, which was just insane. The number of people that was going on at the same time as the national championship game. The college football season's over, and congratulations to Alabama on winning, the college football playoff. But when you look at the annual history books and when you look at records, there's only one school in the country that's going to look at the records undefeated, and that's the University of Central Florida. They finished here 13-0. They beat every team on their schedule. They beat top 25 teams. They beat teams that were in bowls. They went in and beat the SEC school that was the only team to beat Alabama all season. Our college football playoff champions is a team that didn't even play in their conference championship game and finished second in their own division. So you have a team that's not even a conference champion that's proclaimed as the college football playoffs national champion. And UCF, a team that been ducked and dodged by most of these schools because most of the big-time schools don't have a single benefit of playing UCF. And two, none of these schools want to play home and homes, which means they have to come down to Orlando. So Scott Frost magically rides off to the sunset as he heads to Nebraska, and Frost, I wish Coach Frost all the love and the good luck in Lincoln at alma mater. But, his team never had a chance to play on that big stage. I mean, the Peach Bowl was a great game, and what you saw was on the offensive end was UCF's worst offensive game of the season, and they still won.
So tell me this, was Coach Frost still out there actively recruiting up until the day he left?
Well, actually, when we got the word at the conference championship game, I was covering the championship game, we got the word in the fourth quarter that Frost had accepted the job in Nebraska. So when he addressed his players, the next day, the same day, and then he accepted the job, at that point in time, he was done recruiting with UCF. The team had gotten together, and they voted, and they wanted Scott to coach the bowl game. So Scott and his assistants were able to coach the bowl game while the university went out and found their brand new head coach. They had to make a coaching decision pretty quickly because it's right in the middle of recruiting season, and Josh Heupel was selected as the head coach. For those who know who Josh Heupel is, he was the head coach at Missouri, had led the highest scoring offense in the SEC last year. Missouri was scoring points on everybody last year. So he's going to bring that offense over to UCF. And during that process, Scott was recruiting for Nebraska and getting these kids ready for the Peach Bowl at the same time. On top of that, a family-related note, he's a first-time father. His son was just his child was just born right before the USF game.
Wow.
So in November. So he's dealing with a newborn child, his first newborn child in California, recruiting in Nebraska and getting those kids ready, and coaching down here in Florida, getting these kids ready for the biggest game of their lives.
Pretty darn amazing, to tell you the most. I mean, this is Late Night Parents. Ways to follow the show, latenightparents.com. We're talking with Danny Thompson. Best ways to follow Danny on Twitter is NBADT29. He's a great follow, too. So, Danny, got to ask you about another winner, Nick Saban. I'm going to need you to step into his shoes. If you're Nick Saban, are you more concerned with breaking Bear Bryant's record or getting back into the NFL and rewriting history and then kind of erasing those two disappointing seasons you had with the Dolphins?
You go for legacy. At this point, you've won 6 national championships at Alabama. Just think about that. You've won 6 national championships. That's like Bill Belichick winning the number of Super Bowls he's won in New England. You go after Bear Bryant's record. It's much more attainable, and what you're doing, you have a better chance of breaking Bear Bryant's record than stopping what you're doing and transitioning yourself to a league that is based upon player egos and player salaries. College football is about getting kids to the NFL. What Saban is doing at Alabama is a factory. If he decides to come back, for example, which is we're pretty much sure he's coming back, he returns a team that's ready to win a national championship. His 3 best offensive players were all freshmen. The kid Tua is a true freshman. Now, not to mention you have Jalen Hurts, who was the starting quarterback that got you to the championship game and was still a starting quarterback through the first half. Saban has a factory. Go after Bear Bryant because it's much more easier to obtain. And number 2, you're at that university. If you could upstage Bear Bryant at his own university, you become much more than a coaching legend. You become a coaching god, quote unquote. So I think if I'm Saban, I would, even if the NFL was not exactly the biggest success, oh well, not everybody is successful in the NFL. So I stay in college.
All right. As we move towards the NFL, next question for you is, and it's for a team that you cover, the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm just going to throw this question out here because, I see him getting ripped on social media. I just know this much. If you're a quarterback in the playoffs and you run for more yards that you actually pass for, I think there's a problem. But Blake Bortles mentioned to the media, my question to you is Blake Bortles playing himself? Was he actually trying to compare himself to LeBron James, or did you take it as Blake was saying, if you hate on LeBron James, then he doesn't have a chance?
You got to understand, Blake Bortles, when it comes to Jaguar fans, is about 90% get this guy out the door, and 10% is because they're all UCF alums and fans. Blake Bortles, and I love Blake. Blake's a great guy, great person to speak with, always very candid. And, he's still a kid. The problem is Blake Bortles has never developed into a quarterback that Jacksonville fans have expected. He was drafted, in the top 5 from UCF. He's a local boy. He's from the area. He led UCF to the Fiesta Bowl, which was UCF which put him on the national spotlight when they went out to Tempe and won that game. He had a very good first 2 seasons, and then he was actually a Pro Bowl alternate as a second year in the league. He started to regress, and as soon as he started regressing, the turnovers, the sacks, just the bad decision making, and he forgot how to hit a receiver all at the same time. He regressed. It just so happens this was an option year for Bortles and the Jaguars. The quarterbacking situation in preseason was pretty simple. It was between him and Chad Henne. In layman's terms, it's like choosing between, already chewed gum and gum that's sitting under a desk at school. Which one are you going to chew? It's the worst of both worlds. Jaguar fans knew when this was coming. All that they were expecting him to do was to stay upright, don't get hurt, and they could get rid of him at the end of the season. A funny thing happened on the way. I think Blake Bortles and the entire Jaguar team started watching, I don't know, the cult classic Major League. They all got it together, and Bortles just became amazing after week 3. Well, I'm not saying Bortles is the MVP of this league, but Bortles looked like a pretty good NFL quarterback, up until the final 2 weeks of the season. The playoff game, he was just awful, but he made enough plays to beat the Buffalo Bills. Now they're going to Pittsburgh this weekend, a place where they blew out the Steelers 30-9 earlier this season. And so to bring this all together, to answer your question about LeBron James comparison, that Blake Bortles has caught enough, mess from the Jacksonville media and everything that surrounds the Jaguars for years, especially from the fan base. This is the same fan base that was yelling for Colin Kaepernick back in preseason.
Right.
They're begging Shad Khan to give Kaepernick a chance. And I'll be honest with you, if Jacksonville was starting out 0-4, instead of the start they had, I think the Colin Kaepernick chance we've been hearing in Jacksonville all until they signed him. Shad Khan didn't expect this. Now, here's the real question for Jacksonville. If the Jaguars go into Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers this weekend, Blake Bortles has a $19 million option that the Jaguars have to pick up or decline for next season.
Wow.
If they pick him up, it's $19 million. If they don't, they are playing the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes or Eli Manning. And just remember, in the NFL right now, Kirk Cousins' franchise tag for the Washington Redskins is $34.8 million next season. The transition tag is at $28.8 million, or you are going to be looking at Matthew Stafford type of money. I'm not sure if Shad Khan and those guys want to look at the Kirk Cousins tree, the Alex Smith trade route tree, trading for Eli Manning to get him out of New York, or drafting a quarterback. But obviously, since you're in the playoffs, getting one of those elite quarterbacks, quote-unquote, in this draft, you're not going to get the 20s. So Bortles is playing for his NFL career this weekend in Pittsburgh. But, yes, I get the warranted hate is only because of the fact that Bortles is not a like man in Jacksonville. So the comparison to LeBron James is him saying that, hey, listen, if you can hate LeBron James, and he's arguably the best player in the NBA right now, and arguably one of the top 5 to 10 players in the history of basketball, if you can hate him, then, hey, my job and hating me is pretty simple. So, I take it from that perspective.
I will give honorable mentions to Saxonville and
yes.
the stud that helped me out all season long, Leonard Fournette. Had him on my fantasy team, and there was like maybe a 4-game stretch where he was a total lock. And I don't know, when you have certain tools around you, and you've got a stud as a running back, and you've got, a defense that's just spitting nails.
And tell you the crazy thing about Jacksonville's team, and we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the predictions later, is that Bortles is doing this with a banged-up offensive line. His best receiver, Allen Robinson, Pro Bowl caliber receiver Allen Robinson, was hurt before he even played a single regular season game.
Wow.
Marquise Lee's been hurt for a good stretch of the season. I'm sorry, Marquise Lee was hurt. Allen Hurns is out. So now you're playing with a guy, D.D. Westbrook, who is coming off IR a couple weeks ago. You're playing with Keelan Cole. If you look at these guys, you would not even realize who half these receivers are. His tight end can't catch the football, and Bortles is, he doesn't have all his top-flight talent, but yet and still they're still winning. So Bortles must be doing something right. Ted, if he wins this game, Ted, and somehow they can get to the AFC Championship game and somehow maybe make the Super Bowl, the name Trent Dilfer will come into the comparison of Blake Bortles for the rest of his career.
Another honorable mention, this past season, regular season, I went to the Jets game, was invited, some, good folks there, and they happened to be playing the Jags. So I got to see the Jaguars up close. As we move along, I'm going to ask you, we're going to flip it out to the West Coast, because I got to say this much. We saw the Gruden press conference, and then we saw the reports that the Raiders are being investigated, and is that by the Fritz Pollard Alliance, saying that the Rooney Rule was kind of pushed to the side. Now, Number one, the Oakland Raiders do have an African-American general manager in Reggie McKenzie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does he not know what he's doing? Because I was told he was interviewing black coaches, but wasn't making that public knowledge. So now there's so many different questions left or right. So there were some questions that say Fritz Pollard Alliance, they were okay with the interviews that took place. Things just didn't seem too right. On ESPN, you had people congratulating John Gruden, and he's saying, oh, well, the ink is not dry on the contract. I haven't gone down for the interview, and that was a total sham. So is it valid to have the Raiders investigated right now? And the follow-up question for you is it time for the Rooney Rule to go away?
I don't think it's time for the Rooney Rule to go away, only because of the fact that it guarantees African Americans and other minorities a shot at an NFL job. Because as we learned over the years in the NFL or like other professional sports, it is a recycle factory of coaches. It's a fraternity, and unfortunately, a lot of the coaches or candidates are not African American. So I think the Rooney Rule is in place to do such a thing. Now, Reggie McKenzie, if that's the case, we didn't interview African American or made public knowledge, that is his mistake. And if they get penalized for it, they get penalized for it. You know the rules, especially if you're an African American GM. You should be the one person that follows the rules in this situation. Look, anybody knew who was interviewing for the Oakland job wasn't going to get it anyway. You go for the experience. They knew they had their eyes set on Gruden, and they have 100 million reasons why they're going to put their faith in Gruden. But you're right. I mean, the Rooney Rule should stay in place because a lot of times it could be that real hotshot coordinator that nobody's paying attention to that is a person of ethnicity that might not get the opportunity.
But tell me this much. It seems like people are going around the Rooney Rule. It's like, hey, I'm going to call this tight end coach from XYZ team just so I can have a phone conversation so I can check the box. I mean, because if that's the route that these owners are going, then I think the rule itself needs to be addressed.
Agreed. But my point is, though, but people do interviews over the phone. That's what the owners are going to say. Hey, we interview over the phone all the time. But you're correct. I think if that's the case and we're just getting simple phone calls in a situation, you have to really, like I said, investigate this rule and say, hey, listen, these guys have to have a face-to-face interview, at least one. Make this man come out and put a suit and tie on. You don't want him sitting in his living room eating oatmeal, watching his children play in the living room. To answer 3 questions, that's it.
Right. I just kind of go back, because the last time I had a problem with this, or this came up, I think I was interviewing Antoine Staley, and I asked him about the Rooney Rule. And, it's a touchy topic because, we're African Americans. And, of course, we want, if there's something in place, that's going to allow us to have that opportunity, yes. At the same time, you want who you want for your team or for your organization. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's number one. And I kind of go back to when Pete Carroll was hired by the Seattle Seahawks. And there was just so much back and forth. Is he being hired as a head coach or is he being hired as EVP? And Leslie Frazier was reached out to. And I think Leslie Frazier declined the interview. I think he did because he knew it was a sham. And then I think later in Pete Carroll's first season, he was given his EVP title. So you're kind of sitting there like the cat with the popcorn that we always talk about.
Mm-hmm.
You're standing there and you're like, okay, if you wanted to bring him in all along, then just do it. Don't make the rule look like a sham.
You're trying to bring somebody in. We're really not.
It's kind of like you're at work. There's an opportunity that's available. You have your buddy, and you're giving the interview, Danny, and you're kind of giving him the wink, wink. in regards to, okay, so, you're going up against candidate X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
You already have it in. I don't know. I know we're dealing with billionaires and their hobbies or their toys, meaning their football organizations. I just think the rule itself needs to be really addressed, and it needs to be more than what it is right now. My next question for you is, earlier today there was the announcement about the teams that will be participating in London.
Oh, yeah.
There's two teams that I want you to comment on. The two teams are, if you were a part of either the Oakland Raiders or the Jacksonville Jaguars, would you want to be a part of this London rotation? I mean, first, specifically, I want you to speak to the Oakland Raiders. They only have 2 years left in Oakland. That means at least 16 home games. You just given one up. And then last season, you gave one up to go to Mexico City. So, number one, Oakland Raiders, and then number two, Jacksonville Jaguars. What's your take on that?
Let's start with the Raiders. I think, you're in the process of getting ready to go to Las Vegas, but there's nothing more significant than starting, a tradition with the younger people over in Europe. People know the Raiders, and they're a household name wherever you go. People know about the silver and black. I hate giving up the home game, in London. I see what the NFL is trying to do because I think within the next 5 years, Ted, I think you might agree with me that London's going to get a Super Bowl very soon. I think when that stadium is finished, when Tottenham Spurs Stadium is finished outside of London, that is going to be the home for the Super Bowl. They're going to get one. And then once London gets that Super Bowl, the real question is the NFL going to give London an expansion team outside of that? Now, they did make some changes to the rule this year about London, but like I said, for the Raiders case, it's about global exposure. It's about global exposure and getting people wear silver and black out in London, England.
Okay.
Now,
I just want to jump in here and say I've attended the 3 Raiders games, not in the West Coast, not in the Black Hole. One in New York, one in Baltimore, and one in D.C. And I tell you, at each of those venues, I saw more silver and black than expected. So I think that the Raiders, along with the Dallas Cowboys and the Patriots, are already global teams.
And you can only imagine, Ted, the number of people that are going to travel to London, knowing they have literally 10 months to get ready for this. They're going to fly. It's going to be a silver and black stadium inside Tottenham. And I think Tottenham's colors are silver and black, to be honest with you.
So what's your take?
So,
what's your take on the Jags? I mean, they've been like the poster child for London.
Yes, I know. And it hurts my heart that they're sending the Eagles game over to London. I'm thinking to myself when I'm at work today, I saw the Eagles, the game they chose. I'm like, of all the home games, you could have sent the Bengals game over there. You could have sent, the Titans game over there. I don't know. You could have sent the game against UCF over there. But don't send the Eagles. I actually wanted to see Carson Wentz and those guys in Philadelphia. Listen, in Jacksonville's case is a little bit different. Shad Khan, he has his soccer team over in London. I think his team is Tottenham Spurs actually. But he has the stake over in London. He's in the English Premier League. Of course, he lives over there. And this home game actually helps the Jaguars make a profit because the rest of their home games, if you pay attention to Everbank Field, Jacksonville has the lowest capacity in the NFL when it comes to stadiums because if you look at three or four sides of the stadium, there's tarp everywhere because the Jaguars have issues selling tickets. They've had issues selling tickets for years. So they put the tarp out to help with the blackout rule, and of course the blackout rule doesn't exist anymore. But at the end of the day, the Jaguars don't sell enough tickets to make revenue. So they said one game to London. That one game in London helps them get the revenue they need because, of course, you're selling out a 70,000-seat stadium. Everybody's buying merchandise, and guess what? You're not on American soil. So it makes everything perfect. So Shad knows what he's doing, and he's going to continue playing with London until either he's able to buy a team in London or they put an expansion team out there. But I think the Jaguars will be there, for the next 5-6 years.
Just a follow-up question to that. So are you telling me the Jaguar Stadium is smaller than the stadium that the LA Chargers play in?
Yes.
Oh, my.
Saxonville's about 55,000 without the tarp on a sellout.
So they played really good football this year. You're telling me even with them playing good football, because I know you were there about 5-6 times this season covering them, there weren't any sellouts?
No. There are always player tickets available, let's just say that. The game last week was the first time they've had the tarp taken off in years. That should tell you something.
Wow. Okay. All right. We'll go in a totally different direction.
That's right.
I have on here, I mean, Rich, you should be commended for the work that you do, always. I mean, Dr. Michele, nothing more I can say for the stuff that you do for the community, for the kids, all the above. And it's appropriate that, the day of service is January 16th. And we have on latenightparents.com tips to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day. Each of us will read a specific, and I'm touching it like it's a touchscreen. I think there's 4 items here. No, there's 5 items here. So we'll go round robin. Organize your workplace, school, or community group. Maximize your impact by organizing a group to serve the community with an activity done all at your own location in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. Choose a local charity and determine the best way for your group to show support. Ideas include packing snack bags for after-school programs, collecting coats, hats for a homeless shelter, planting trees, creating a mentoring program, or writing letters of support to our military abroad.
I like the second one here.
Then it's all yours.
Teach your children. The kids are at home from school. Remember, as a day of service, MLK Day, Martin Luther King Day is supposed to be a day off, not a day off to just sit around, but a day on, a day to be involved in different activities with your children. And you can show them an example of service by volunteerism. And volunteerism for me, and especially for my kids, is something that's not just on this day. It's something that we have to do throughout our life.
Yes.
So I believe that's something that I think is pretty deeply ingrown in my children.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Leading by example.
We try.
Okay.
God, for my parents, had no other choice. 2-3 years old, here we are, out at a Democratic convention or a PTA meeting.
Yep.
I'm hungry.
Well, you will wait. Well, another thing we can do here is raise needed goods. Support a local charity with a drive for the goods they need to serve the community. An online You Give Goods drive is the new way to raise food and supplies for charity. You can set up your drive in a matter of minutes and have it underway in time for MLK Day this year. Then, invite your online community via email and social media to support your cause by purchasing items that will ship to your selected charity. A You Give Goods drive builds up your community as it offers tangible aid to local charity, and it provides a welcome opportunity for your friends and family to be part of this year's MLK Day. Which, that sounds good. I mean, we all have groups in our communities which are in need, and it's not really too hard to locate them. So, through churches, through, talk to the police, see who knows or who needs anything, and raise those goods, put something together. You never know what could come from it.
Yes, because I think what we normally do is get it from the social workers or the guidance counselors at the school. They'll let us know what kids they think need something a little extra than what their parents are able to give to them.
Item number 4, spread the message. Use social media. Use the hashtag MLK Day to share MLK's ideals and inspiring words. You will find his words to be stunningly timely and relevant in today's world. You got to forward this specific page. Talk about what you do in honor of MLK Day and encourage the circle of friends to take action and support the community. I just want to share with you, our listeners and folks here, So I do some work with the United People Organization, and every year we have MLK Day March. It's usually it takes place within the village of Hempstead. Mm-hmm. So tomorrow it's going to originate at Kennedy Park, and where we would usually have it at Faith Baptist Church. But tomorrow we're having it at Miracle Christian Center. It's a combination of the high schools, of Hempstead High School. All the different, governing bodies come together. The local councilwoman, Dorothy Gooseby, stops by. And it's a show of solidarity and service that we all are trying to do each and every year. Mm-hmm. So it's could we do more? Of course we could do more. But as it was mentioned earlier, that tomorrow's not a day to sit around and sit here and watch the NBA. We all love the NBA. We all love sports and hockey in America and everything else like that. But take the time out, do something special in your community, working with the youth. Somehow, you got to get out and reach that person that, who might be in need or might be in need of a specific service.
Right. That's true.
Yes. And that goes into Commit to Service in 2017 and use Martin Luther King Jr.'s example to plan a 2017 where you take action. If you're unable to volunteer tomorrow, just simply research and see what charity you can actually spend your time with and figure out how you can serve them. If you can't serve them tomorrow, how you can serve them in the future. Because any help that you can give goes a long way, and that's something that we have to consider. And I guess, I have a question for you guys. Mm-hmm. Have either of you, did you meet Dr. Martin Luther King?
I did not.
I never did. But then again, I was kind of young, so.
You were kind of young?
I was kind of young.
Well, I got a chance.
Wait, hold on.
Wait, there's another person in the room you might want to ask that question of.
Wait, hold on. Before you ask that question,
well, she never.
I wasn't born yet. Okay.
Right. He wasn't born yet. He wasn't born yet.
Right. You mean your children were not born yet?
Why is everyone looking at me?
So the question to the videographer of the evening, Linda, is: have you ever met Dr. Martin Luther King?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure if I actually met him, but I do have, and this is a radio show, in my bag I have a letter that was written to me on the King family letterhead in 1970, January of that year, and I was probably 8.5 years old. And it started off something to the effect, "Hi Linda, we haven't heard from you in a while. We hope everything is okay. Coretta wants you to have these items." And in there it was some information regarding the mission statement for the new King Center, because it was just being opened, I could think, that year. There are newspaper articles and other things like that. So whether or not I actually met Dr. King, I'm not sure. No. But I know I was in contact with his family apparently quite often since they hadn't heard from me in a while.
Oh, wow. Did you bring it?
Yes, I do have it. I can show it to you later.
I didn't know she brought it.
I am just so in tune.
I think that was a setup. That was a setup.
Wow. I don't know.
See, you question my abilities.
We have learned.
Oh, my goodness. I had no idea where this was coming from. I was just like, okay, I'm rolling with it.
And I didn't speak to you before, did I, Linda?
No, not at all.
I know nothing about it.